Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Epic Summit podcast. Unfortunately, Laurent Bannock is still away, so those special Epic Edition episodes over on the We Do Science podcast will continue at some point in the near future. And the guests who we've had on, so we've had Greg and the guests who we have on today, will both still appear on those podcasts with Laurent. So last week we had some great feedback from the Greg Knuckles podcast, which can be found over on the website. And this week we have a UK favourite on board, Martin MacDonald. Now I won't say too much about him, as I'm sure he's going to reveal all. But Martin, you there? How are you doing?
Yes, hi Richard, hi.
How are you doing today?
Yes, not bad, thank you. Slightly sleep deprived, but functioning just okay.
You've just had a child?
Yes, 8 weeks ago.
8 weeks.
Little girl, yeah. She doesn't like sleeping is one of her perks. So, yeah.
I see. Well, that's just what comes with having a baby, I suppose. So let's firstly get into it. Let's speak a bit about you, Martin. So who you are, what you do, or what you have done specifically.
Yeah, so in terms of, I suppose, professional qualifications, I initially kind of trained as a sports science student at Loughborough University, and then wanted to specialise more in nutrition. So then I went on and did postgraduates in sport and exercise nutrition, and then later in clinical nutrition, because of the way kind of my work went and the type of people that I was working with. And initially I started kind of, I suppose, as a few people, trying to make ends meet. So I was lecturing undergraduates. I was working as a gym instructor for about 14 hours a week. And on the side of that, trying to build up clients, really, get a reputation, and which was helped by, at the time, I was competing in natural bodybuilding, and obviously, but when people see someone with a six-pack or whatever, they're quite lean, suddenly they think they know everything about nutrition.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll touch on it today, but everything I did then, I'd probably do the opposite of now. So it's just fortunate that people don't distinguish the difference. But I just basically didn't eat for 12 weeks and I got lean. It's pretty simple. So yeah, that was how things started. And then I got a few, through working hard, but also a few lucky breaks, ended up working with some celebrities who, had kind of pretty fantastic transformations. And then that's when Mac Nutrition was born. And that's my consultancy, which over the years has grown, and now it used to just be me and kind of my online CV, as it were, really, and now it's we've got office space, consultation rooms, employees, etc., and hold a number of different contracts with that. And then now I've kind of tried to separate myself a bit and just try not to be the face or the voice of Mac Nutrition and let other people's writings and ideas go there. And I still hold contracts with I suppose my work's still quite wide ranging, and so I don't, the things we'll get into today, it's worth bearing in mind. I talk from both a, ex-competitive bodybuilder and someone who's really interested in the fitness industry and kind of physique sports, but also a lot of my work and contracts are in professional sports. So I'm the lead nutritionist for Derby County. I've held the British weightlifting and Paralympic powerlifting contracts for 6 or so years, going to the Olympics, Paralympics, World Champs, Commonwealth Games, and then I still have a few private clients who I work with in kind of clinical aspects, diseases of obesity, those kind of things.
That is a huge, broad range of work.
It's a wide remit, yeah.
But I suppose you're someone who would appeal to pretty much everyone then, on some form of level.
I hope so. The problem is doing that many things. I suppose it spreads you
You're jack of all trades, but
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that isn't the best, but
no, it's not. So, but hopefully, it doesn't make me a complete rookie at all the different things I do. There is a lot of tie-in.
Yeah, I was actually going to get into your Mac Nutrition company, but I suppose you've just spoken about it. But I know that's you're very much a leading figure for PTs to learn and develop themselves. But if people aren't wanting to pay for maybe one of your mentorships, you have a podcast, don't you? That I know is a very, very popular one.
So that's an interesting one. So. You've mentioned there the mentorship is something that we've created for practitioners, PTs, nutritionists, S&C coaches. Really, I suppose there's lots of qualifications around you can do nutrition-wise, but this is coming, if you don't want to go back to university and do a master's in nutrition, or even if you've done that, but you want some real-world practical kind of teachings, that's what we do there. And then, aside from that, the podcast, I actually teamed up with a dietitian because I thought, it was quite. I'm not sure if you know Richard, but in the past I've been a little bit of hated by the dietetics arena because I've spoken out against some of the things that have become ingrained in dietetics that only some of really critical thinking and contemporary dietitians are really tackling, and so we started that podcast to it's interesting to have those two completely different backgrounds of training, professional training, and so that's Real Nutrition Radio if people want to check that out.
Yeah, I definitely think people should, as well as obviously listening to this one. Okay, Martin, let's get straight into it. So we've had there's a few questions from myself as well as some of our Facebook followers. So you're pretty much well known for questioning, as you've just kind of said about the dietetics kind of thing, questioning contemporary thinking in regards to sports nutrition.
Yeah.
And as you work in professional sport, do you think there's any particular area that needs addressing or is maybe overemphasized?
Yeah, so I suppose the biggest area for me has been, interestingly, carbohydrates. So in the fitness arena, I don't know what your background on this is, but in the fitness arena, I suppose at the minute, carbohydrates are getting a bad name, or they've got this bad name. And so in the fitness arena, I'm trying to balance things of like, don't go zero carb, carbs don't make you fat. But actually on the flip side, in the sporting arena, from my, for my career length, the real overemphasis has come on carbohydrates, really at the detriment to performance, to body composition. And again, not because carbohydrates make you fat, but because people think that eating low fat, they can do no wrong. And that's a really big area, which at the minute, I was at a conference recently, and you have got some of the low carb, I'm going to call them zealots, who really are, out there. But they're kind of getting some fame within the, I suppose, sporting arena, and people are picking up on that. And unfortunately, instead of what I've been trying to do is, I suppose, balance the equation and say, look, eating a less than 10% fat diet, 70% or more carbohydrate diet, let's bring that into what evidence would show is probably a bit more beneficial for you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, then these are, don't eat any carbohydrate, eat a high-fat diet. And there's so many studies on a pure, very low-carb, very high-fat diet in athletes. And it's, in my opinion, unequivocal that it just doesn't work. There needs to be something more clever about it. And I often tell stories on the mentorship about a few, clients over the years who I've moderated their carbohydrate intake, as I kind of mentioned there, said, well, you don't need to eat zero fat, and I've upped their fat intake. And, they've done really well, they found it fantastic, and then, work with them for 6 months, a year, and then a couple of years down the line, they might have changed discipline, a different race length, they were running half marathons, now they're running marathons, whatever, and they've come back to me and said, oh, can you just tweak some things for me? And I've got a food diary from them, and literally from going, I've reduced their carbs slightly, increased their fat slightly, they've found it good, and they've basically just kept going in their, off their own back, and I'm like, where are the carbs in your diet? And they're like, well, we removed some and it was good, so I just gradually removed them all.
So they associate that lowering of carbs to be beneficial, and if they keep doing it, then they may get even more benefits. Yeah,
it's just that human nature thing of more is better. People just love extremes, and at the same time, extremes are actually easier to stick to often, because I'm actually quite against the advice of just have everything in moderation, because it's completely arbitrary, and the reason people get results from zealot-like advice initially is because it does dramatically change your habits.
I think people in the fitness industry love, just the type of person in the industry. They love to follow something extreme. That's what they're looking out for. No one's looking for a coach who pushes moderation. That's not going to sell. If something chucks out carbohydrates completely and then has a title saying ultimate fat burning, you people buy into that.
Big time. It's like I said, I think it's partly human nature, but also in the fitness industry, extremes sell in everything. Body composition, the extremes of leanness are desirable. The extremes in strength, all of these different kind of things. So it's hard. From my opinion, at least people should be educated on why that, maybe not be the case. Everyone can try it. I've tried I fare really well on a next to zero carbohydrate diet, other than the fact that I like eating pick and mix. So from a physiological perspective, I feel great, but I just don't like it, and I could never stick to it. So that, I think from a sports nutrition thing, that's where I've over the years challenged things, and people not realizing as well that the research, for instance, on say football performance, the research shows that insanely high intakes of carbohydrate are beneficial for football. So talking about like 700 grams a day, 700 and 800 grams of carbohydrate a day is better than say 500 in terms of lots of different things. So time spent at high intensity activity, distance covered in during the match, drop off in distance in the second half, all of these things are benefited. But the problem is, and as I kind of get more contracts, I obviously take over from previous nutritionists and dietitians, and you see the advice day to day, week to week, and it's basically eat carbs all day long. But everyone knows about periodization of training. Footballers don't train hard 7 days a week. They have days off, they have technical days, and they do have body composition issues if they've been told, oh yeah, drink loads of sports drinks, you should be having the funniest one, a fact sheet on appropriate snacks whilst travelling, and it's like Turkish Delight, Ice Gems, sports drinks, jelly sweets, and I was like, oh my goodness, what on earth? And I basically realised that they were all just low fat snacks. It doesn't matter if they're junk food as long as they're low fat. So I think a very roundabout way of answering your question, for me in professional sport, the carbohydrates have been overemphasised by both athletes misinterpreting what they're told, but also practitioners not having a critical enough awareness of, maybe that 10 grams per kilogram type intake is more specific to the day of the game, the day before the game.
I mean, that leads us nicely onto another question that I had prepared. I listened to a lecture from, I think it was Dr. James Martin, about making weight in footballers and body composition being an issue with some players. He spoke about a lot of things, and one of them was about how they can perform on a high fat diet. But one of them, and one of the ways of making weight or improving body composition in some of these footballers was fasted cardio, and you will know that that's been a heated topic lately. With some new research coming out. But have you, what's your thoughts on fasted cardio in that degree?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting one. Because I got a couple of text messages this morning about some tweets on Twitter. I've not been on Twitter today, and there was some discussion over fasted cardio, and really it was idiotic discussions on Twitter, far from probably what James Morton was talking about. But we've got the new study by Brad Schoenfeld, which is the one of a kind. It's not without its limitations, but it is, it's the first in an area. And fasted cardio, I suppose for me, is something that I've been aware of since my days of bodybuilding. So going back, 13 years or so, when I first was like, oh, fasted cardio, that's the best thing for fat loss. And interestingly, I always knew, in inverted commas, that fasted cardio was the way forward for fat loss. But during my entire bodybuilding career, if you can call it that, I never did it because I was too lazy. But where to begin? Funnily enough, James Morton spoke at a conference I was at recently and mentioned this. And in the question time, I asked one question, and so I suppose he's well aware of my views as well. That really the I suppose, can you call it bioenergetics of fasted cardio just don't play out. If you take it back to the maths of it, there's so many things left to be proven that you simply cannot have a strong opinion, in my opinion, on fasted cardio, because unless fasted cardio is doing something to the energy balance equation, either acutely or long term, there's no way that it can produce more favourable levels of fat loss. So there's one new study, I think it's by a researcher called Iwayama, is the first, if anyone wants to look it up. It's 2014. And what they did was basically, and this is all off the top of my head, but I think it was the second of the studies they had done. They had done 50 minutes of fasted exercise. And in this new study, they did 100 minutes. And what they essentially showed was that over 24 hours, they were able to produce a greater fat oxidation over 24 hours. So then it was like, oh, look, fasted cardio, you have less fat. Let's say you have 40 grams less of fat in your body because of that session. So then it's kind of like, wow, well, brilliant. It does work. But the problem is that's 24 hours. And you have to look at, again, if you look in their study, they said that there was no difference in energy balance. So both, there was no difference in calories burned, let's, put it bluntly. And therefore, the other group, you would assume, if they maintain muscle mass, so that's my assumption, is you maintain muscle mass, you eat protein and you do some weight training. That's who does fasted cardio and doesn't eat enough protein and do weight training. But so therefore, the other group is in a negative carbohydrate balance. But because you've got limited stores of carbohydrate, you take that 24-hour study into a 48-hour, into a week study, into a month study, like Brad Schoenfeld did. It no longer works because you've got limited carbohydrate. So you may always stay 20, 30 grams ahead of the curve because you basically started burning fat sooner.
Yeah.
But, you're only an hour ahead of the game, and a year down the line, you're only an hour ahead of the game, and it never gets any more or less. So it just doesn't work. There's lots of stuff but in terms of fasted cardio, it is a really, because I know a lot of James's initial work was in the performance adaptations to essentially fasted cardio, but it's actually low carb or low glycogen, low carbohydrate availability or low glycogen. And for me, that's a massively interesting area and is something really unique that his research and others are adding to the field. But I've always said, right from my first knowledge of it's called train low for any of the listeners. Train low, compete high. I've always said it's not a method for fat loss until we come up with the evidence of, is it changing protein balance, muscle mass distinctly? Is it changing energy balance somehow? Is it changing energy expenditure? Somehow do you burn more calories? So far the studies don't show that at all. Does it change energy intake? Doesn't show that either. Does it change muscle mass? Doesn't show that. So it's such a good area at the minute for people to, I suppose, read into and get an opinion on, because everyone's going to be talking about this, I think.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, a good friend of mine and another Epic speaker, Joseph Agu, has just written a new blog post for his page, and it's on that topic in particular. And he's
is it out yet? Because I didn't see it come out.
Yeah, he posted it yesterday, I think, and he literally covers all the evidence and speaks about it in depth.
Fantastic. So people can go read that after my poor attempt at explaining it.
Yeah, you covered the same kind of topics anyway that Joe goes through.
Yeah.
But overall, with fasted cardio, I suppose people need to know that there's no real extra benefit from doing fed cardio, but if you prefer actually doing fasted cardio and that's what you really like to do, then there's nothing really wrong with that.
Yeah, totally. And there's so many things within nutrition that I've changed my views on over the years, and it's such a boring, it doesn't sell. I now know that I'm not going to sell anything great, because there's, if you want to tell people about some special method, if you want to be evidence-based, you just can't, because like you said there, it comes down to the individual's preference, and then that's coaching, and that doesn't sell. So that would be my message. Is I still have athletes, clients occasionally doing fasted cardio or fasted training, and with the athletes, I've got that benefit of it might affect performance, but even with clients who are just business people, if it suits their lifestyle, they like it, fantastic. But it's and even within, some of the weight making sports like the weightlifters and powerlifters, that's an area, I suppose, of re-education there. If as soon as they need to make weight, they even then they know it, sometimes they still default, oh, should I start my fasted cardio? And I say, well, just remember that that's what you want to do, but it doesn't need to be fasted if you don't want it to be. And sometimes, because they're doing very, very strenuous weight training, doing something light and fasted away from the weight session is actually the most beneficial time for them to burn calories and do anything that's low intensity. And it is because the coaches, the sport doesn't want them to affect the weight training to, do some sort of cardiovascular exercise. So, you put it well. You can do fed, you can do fasted. Just burn some calories if you want to lose weight.
Well, it's funny you mentioned within that. You mentioned about being an evidence-based practitioner, and if you're wanting to be one of those, you can't really sell anything spectacular. At the Epic Summit, we're trying to be an evidence-based conference, But
yeah, definitely.
the question is, what exactly does, being an evidence-based practitioner mean? And, how can people distinguish between a coach who claims they are and a coach who actually isn't, even though they claim it?
Yeah. This is actually one of my bugbears, is that, and there's no offence meant by this to anyone, but people are unable to distinguish what an evidence-based practitioner is. So I have, people, this might be, people who follow me on Twitter and people who would follow my work because they think, I'm going to get good information and nothing that's, I'm going to get stuff that's based on research. But on the flip side of it, I get them doing follow Fridays with me, tagging, evidence-based practitioners you should follow at Martin Nutrition, whoever.
Who else?
Yeah, at Stu Phillips, who's like, a world-leading researcher in protein. And then the next two people to follow
are not evidence-based
are absolute jokers. And I sort of, you realise that, oh man, people don't. So for an evidence-based practitioner isn't someone who is, I suppose, boring, and isn't someone who can only operate within the realms of there's a meta-analysis on this, there is a position statement on this, and it says this, therefore I'm allowed to do it. I think I saw a tweet from someone, let me see if I can remember who it is. No, I can't. But basically it said, Jeremy, I don't know how to say his surname.
Is it?
Yeah, there you go. And he put out a tweet basically saying, you don't have to have 100% solid evidence, but you have to know why you're doing it. And, it's really good to learn from practical professional experience. But if there's direct evidence refuting, a method that you are forcing your athletes or clients to use, you can't simply go, yeah, but it works.
It's not good enough.
It's just not good enough. And how can people distinguish? I wrote this in a magazine article, I think in a year or two ago, and I got lots of kind of praise from it. And it was one of those ones where I was like, I finally have written something profound. And I should actually have it revised what I actually said. But it was something like, if you are confused about something, find 2 or 3 practitioners that you respect and essentially ask them all the same question. And hopefully, unless you're really off point and your 3 people who you respect are just 3 jokers, but then not all jokers agree, so at least you'll get some cognitive dissonance there. But yeah, kind of, if you Epic Summit speakers, straight away, Richard Lovett and Epic Summit have created a list of people that people can go to and okay, I'm going to ask Alan Aragon the question, I'm going to ask Brad Schoenfeld, or maybe don't ask him because they're mates. I'm going to ask 2 other people, and if they disagree, then you can work it out. But if you've got and 2 of them agree, and one guy's like, no, you should cut out gluten, it's bad for you, or you should be on an alkaline diet, or the kind of things that I mentioned on my video introduction, just because they're funny ones that it's amazing that people can get away with saying it, and people not realizing that they're not evidence-based. For me, that's it does my head in. And the other thing is if someone says, I'm evidence-based, like, I just don't like liars and deceitful people. I'm actually happier with the person who says, I don't really know why this works, I'm not evidence-based, but I know it works and I'm not clever enough to work out why. Or, so I've got my model and I'm going to do it. And if I can't help someone, I just send them elsewhere because I only know this. I'm like, at least you're honest. Whereas people saying, I only base my work on the science and I really dissect what the current medical profession is doing, or
it's like
they're complete bros, as the term is.
It's like we're not, throughout all practitioners in this industry, we're not disputing. No one is disputing the results that anyone gets and saying, you know, some people are getting these incredible results, but it's the way that they are spouting to the audience or that they're following what the reason is that they've got these results. So they've said, you know, I now cut gluten out of their diet, and now look at him. So everyone's like, whoa, you know, gluten was the actual cause, but really we've just lowered his caloric intake and maybe upped his protein, you know.
Yeah.
And people aren't realising
it's funny you mentioned there about results. Yeah. Results are... It's a real shame. I mean, I saw someone post and it's like... even with me, I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit harsh. But at the same time, I was like, you're completely right. Because they said, so what? Everyone can get results. And, you know, this was someone who I follow and like. And I was like, oh, that's not a very nice thing to say. But I was like, yeah, but they're right. Anyone can. Yeah. You know, stupid, like, shake diets and whatever can get results. But they're, you know... it doesn't mean that they're effective or healthy or anything like that. And interestingly, a little thing I'm going to write something about this, but the other thing is you don't know how those results were achieved, you know, with anything, if it's just, one part or there's a bigger part. But also, you don't know if they're actually their results. Like, we've had to take down some of our client pictures from the website because people have been stealing them and putting them around the internet saying that they're their own. You know, so people like Body by Vi, which I wasn't actually aware of. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So they're like one of these stupid shake things. And they stole one of our before and afters and put it in their marketing material. And, you know, so it's again like, oh, they get results. No, they don't. They just steal pictures. And, you know, and then even doctoring the befores to make the lady even bigger. And, you know, she got really upset and then asked us to take it down. So it's, yeah, like results are so meaningless. You know, it's like, oh, and you can achieve it via so many ways. But then what do they look like 3 months after that? Yeah. What is their health at that point, even though they've lost weight? You know, how money did they spend on it? You know, the whole biosignature modulation stuff. You know, I lost weight, but I had to spend £400 on licorice root extract for my out-of-kilter skin fold sites. You know, it's just balmy.
Well, it is effective, though, that licorice stuff.
Yeah, it's true. Tastes nice, does it?
Yeah, no, I don't like licorice myself.
No.
Anyway, Martin, we're getting on a bit, but a final question for you is: I see you have spoken about breakfast a lot in the past. Well, specifically about breakfast and whether this is actually the most important meal of the day, or whether missing it is an issue, which leads on to, you know, intermittent fasting. And the topic on intermittent fasting for the public and intermittent fasting for athletes. Have you got anything to say on that, and whether IF can be used for athletes or indeed for the public's health?
Yeah, so in terms of breakfast, that's something I suppose that I just took it upon myself to talk about a lot, because it's one of those areas where I got very wrong and was kind of... as I think 99% of nutritionists, PTs, dietitians do, is you're basically born knowing that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, thanks to the media, Kellogg's, and the kind of health, you know, your older people. So I was one of these people who said, you must eat breakfast, it's really important. When I got lean, I ate breakfast. It speeds your metabolism, blah, blah, blah. And because I had done that, I thought, well, and then I looked at the research finally and, you know, opened my eyes to, wow, there actually is no evidence for all of these things I've been saying for years. And so, you know, I held my hands up and said, yeah, I was an idiot. And as I think people rarely do. And, you know, rather than saying, oh, because this is a big one, people go, oh, well, the evidence has changed, and so my viewpoint has changed. The evidence didn't change on breakfast. It was never there. I was just saying it. So, Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, I feel a bit like I'm just saying the same old thing, but it ties in well with the intermittent fasting stuff. And it's definitely a worthwhile area. I mean, I've written a whole ebook on it it's a free download on martinmacdonald.com, and about intermittent fasting, because it's a useful tool. And again, you can get people who becomes a bit zealot-like. I know when intermittent fasting got a bit more fitness industry, people were just basing all their programs off it.
Yeah.
The very same way they did with paleo. Yeah. So, but at the same time, that then causes a bit of a backlash. And I've had some of that backlash of like, intermittent fasting is a load of rubbish, and which is such a naive thing to say, because intermittent fasting, I had a researcher who's a friend of mine tweet me and say, "What, you mean breakfast skipping?" Which essentially it can be. That is one way of intermittent fasting. You skip breakfast. And there's now some really good research showing that you don't get negative health consequences of skipping breakfast / intermittent fasting. You don't slow your metabolism. It doesn't lead to lots of muscle loss.
Do you go into survival mode though? That is the question.
That was actually, where was that? Oh, one of the celebrities I work with was in a newspaper or something, and they had an expert, in inverted commas, nutritional therapist commenting on it, and straight away it was, these people are in in survival mode. I was like, and someone then sent me a message like, well, lol, and a link or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but again, like survival mode, it's people just need to not feel judged when they realise they've done it wrong, because it's not saying, because I said survival mode too. That word, that horrible phrase, has come out of my mouth. Yeah. Like you're lucky because it's a bit earlier in your career and you're already more knowledgeable. Whereas I was like, yeah, it's cringeworthy to think of the fact that I was saying that. But yeah, the whole breakfast thing, intermittent fasting. In terms of athletes, it's interesting because that then ties back to what we were discussing earlier about fasted cardio or low carbohydrate availability, is maybe intermittent fasting can be used, whatever you call it, if you're not eating breakfast before a training session, then and it's worth saying that the low carbohydrate availability, you can actually eat protein before and still get those augmented adaptations. But either way, it can be used, and it's something that I've used in probably the very small percentage of athletes, because they're quite different. But the greater population that I've used it with has been general population clients, diet resistant females, as they're called in the research. I've had quite good effects.
Have you so let's say with those diet resistant females, have you used the 5-2 version with them, or alternate day, or 16-8?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, because when you were asking the question, I meant to say that intermittent fasting has because it was on telly and I didn't watch it, but someone tweeted me, but they were talking about the right diet for you, and they actually used the 5-2 diet within there. Okay. And I don't know if they're using the horrible messed up media version or the actual research based one. Yeah. But there are lots of different ones, and I have used the 5-2 version, but a modified one, and I think in my ebook I talk about a case study of that and how I modified it. And but then at the same time, I've been focusing on the more windowed eating, breakfast skipping, fasting for 16 hours, or whatever type practices. But I've never ever done alternate day fasting, which is obviously probably the most research, or at least the earliest one, where you eat nothing for a day, you eat whatever you want for a day, you eat nothing, and then that's quite researched in clinically obese patients. Yeah. And they do get results.
It's funny actually. The not too long ago actually, I saw a well-known coach on Twitter say, state that I would never ever use the 5-2 diet on any clients. It's dangerous, unhealthy, blah blah blah. And I just think, how can you say something so forcefully and purposefully,
Yeah.
and not even you obviously haven't read anything about it.
I'm really surprised by that. Did they say why they wouldn't, or was it just like it's terrible?
No, there's never a why really. It's just listen to me.
Yeah.
This is the case. But with that type of thing, I always think you're telling people here, a lot of people or a lot of your followers, something that's just unequivocally wrong.
Yeah, and I think people they see it put on telly. And they think, oh, it's just some joker on telly trying to, whatever, sell stuff, and they don't realise that actually it's an evidence-based dietitian doing proper peer-reviewed research that has published the stuff on this, and it's good. And one of the main things I saw her speak and had a chat with her, and she essentially said, the main reason, there might be something a little bit magical going on there, but I won't go into that. But she said the main reason it works is adherence. And, if there's anything that as nutritionists, PTs, practitioners, we should be looking at, it's adherence. And it's not why I got into nutrition. I do not care, or I did not care about behaviour change. I didn't care about, I like cool science and overcomplicating stuff. But the fact is that if you want to be a practitioner, the boring stuff is actually more effective.
Well, I suppose it's a good thing that anyone coming to the Epic Summit will be able to listen to you. But in terms of the topic of intermittent fasting, we do actually have Bojan Kostevsky, who's going to speak about the research that we currently have. But overall, that's been a great podcast, Martin. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, good to talk.
Hopefully we'll have you on with Laurent soon.
Yeah, great.
Cool. So we'll speak soon.
Yes, nice to speak to you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.